Without telling us, please.
Okay, you're live.
All right, we're live.
Yeah.
You go live. Okay, you're live.
All right. But I'd like to, a little bit more warning next time, but that's fine.
Well, give me a countdown.
Okay, guys, we're going live in 1 minute. Hey, Mike, if you want to share this on your face, you can.
On your face. Welcome, Facebook world. Good morning. Afternoon if you're on the East Coast.
Uno, dos, tres.
Yeah,
cuatro.
1 in the afternoon. I like being on the West Coast, though. How about you, Benito?
West Coast, best coast,
Ooh.
in my humble but accurate opinion.
If you're in the Philippines, you're on Friday already.
Benito, you ever been to the East Coast?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever been to the Philippines?
I've been to North Carolina, New York, Miami, Philippines. No, never. I heard they make great rice, though. I want to go there.
Oh, you better watch it with the racial comment.
Oh, dang.
Hey, the Philippines have East Coast and West Coast.
You want to tell your bottle cap story on the show? Because
Oh, yeah.
I got one right here.
You can't bring that bottle cap in, Benito.
Very confusing. I still don't understand why that is. I'm thinking because people would, on the they put GHB in that, but still, it doesn't really matter. You know, maybe you're carrying vodka and you pour vodka in with a flask. I don't get it.
No, I don't get it.
I'm trying to see if my Facebook. I'm doing it right.
Are we keeping the music till we start?
Now we're gonna play it in the background a little bit.
No.
The whole show?
Just a little bit.
Oh,
We're gonna keep it really low.
Don't you let that
Okay.
deal go down.
Can you share it on my wall, or I gotta do that? The 162.
you can share it.
I gotta go to the 162 though.
Well, yeah. Is it not connecting or something or what?
I'm just having a hard time focusing. Something like that.
Technical difficulties.
Okay. So there's 162. Right here. So I'm gonna share it. Or where do I share it to?
Your timeline.
Whoa.
Thank you. Mike Melia. How do you spell your last name?
With an M.
Let's do
Oh,
it.
that is a funny question.
All right. Can we get a countdown?
Sure. You guys ready?
Yeah. Keep an eye on that. Make sure we're live the whole time. Okay.
You know, I had a.
That's why I got the chair out right there.
Thanks. All right, Benito, you open up, intro me. We'll go live. We'll hit the book. We'll hit the tour, and then we'll get into the interview. Let's try to leave at least 10 minutes for Mike.
I was thinking
Cut
like
it
12,
short.
12, 13 minutes.
Cool beans. All right. So
High on the personality, light on the content.
That was the prep for the show right there. 30 seconds.
all right. So we're ready to go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the 162 Experience. We are live from Southern California. Beautiful day out today with my co-host Steve Melia. How are you today, Steve?
Benito, good to be back. I know you did episode 15 without me. How was that?
Oh, I felt it, man. I missed you. I gotta be honest, bro. It was
that's very sweet.
it was on fire, but I missed you.
I hate the term bromance, but I think it best describes us.
We got a special guest in the house today.
Oh my gosh.
Mr.
Oh my
Mike
gosh.
Melia.
What up, Mikey?
What is going on, gentlemen?
This is
Man.
gonna be a great show today. You
And I
know,
use that term loosely.
Man, for those of you that don't know, Mike Melia and I have just finished 2 nights back to back. Grateful Dead, John Mayer, Bob Weir, 6th show of the summer. Mike, how you feeling?
I'm a little tired this morning, but I'm doing good.
How about that set list last night, huh? Opening up with Ico all day.
I go.
you know what's interesting though about that? I'm not really into the Dead fan, but I'm getting used to it, hearing the music and everything. John Mayer, for those who don't know, when did he join the band?
Unbelievable. Every Grateful Dead fan that's been around for a minute has the same reaction. Like, man, I didn't know what I think of him at the beginning, but this guy is unbelievable. And if you want to see what we're talking about, just Google the set from last night or any night. Look for Sugar-Ree. He does Sugar-Ree amazingly well. That's one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
And so going down the road feeling bad last night, trucking.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. So Mike Melia, we're going to get started here in just a few minutes. Benito, been on the road. As you know, I launched my second book, The Last 42, last week.
You did, and there's 3 things I'm excited about. Let me tell you what they are, guys. You're watching this on Facebook. We are Facebook Live on the 162 Experience. There's 3 things I want to talk about really quickly. One, I'm excited because we brought mimosas back to the show.
Yes, it's been a minute.
Cheers, everybody. Salud.
Cheers.
I'm like drinking in the middle of the day.
And 2, the second thing is I want to talk about how you always go to events, or we always go to events, and the crazy thing about that is people are like, hey, you know, what can we talk about if they're starting a podcast, if they're starting to put content out there? They're like, what do we talk about? Well, you know what? This is what we talk about. You go to events, you go to exciting things, and we give that information and tell people and share it, teach them what they want to know, and it's an amazing concept. And the third thing I want to talk about and mention to people is that, Steve, you brought out your second book. Now, this is putting you at a different level. The Last 42, that's your new book, published last week. It's amazing. Why don't you tell people about that?
Well, it just feels good. It feels like the story continues. You know, it's I think it's like a musician that maybe puts out a CD and then that's your hits, and you go and, you know, when you perform, that's what you do. But to have another one, it's just like the art continues for me. And really, what I do is I do cool stuff and then I write about it. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I write right in the introduction. I had this long introduction for The Last 42, and at the very last minute, actually, Mike and I were going from one Grateful Dead show in Virginia to New York City, and I was just finishing up doing the final touches of the book and the introduction. I just read it, and I just didn't like it. It didn't sound like me. It was more my editor than me, and I just scratched it, and I did a whole new introduction. And basically, it started off with 28,000 days. You know, life is short. Enjoy the journey. We all have, on average, we live about 28,000 days. We never know which one is going to be our last. And as many of you know, that's what the book is dedicated to. My brother Jim, who passed away. And, you know, we could remember him, or we could just let it go. And we choose to remember our brother. He was a big part of our life, and he's a great guy. And it was less than 3 years ago that Mike and I sat in a bar the day after he passed away. And we had the idea of The Last 42. And I was sitting there, and Mike, I was like, you know, I got my next idea. And he's like, what idea? And I was like, I'm going to go to Mariano Rivera's last 42 game. What did you think the minute I said that? Do you think
I thought that's a great. I think that's a great idea. That's
well, Mike's always very supportive of my little things.
Oh.
But what a heck of an idea, you know, just to, like you said on one of the last shows, we talked about how, you know, people, they pass away and, you know, people want to, you know, go in their shell and just, you know, whether it's crying or whether it's just they shut down around themselves and don't share anything with anybody and they bottle up inside. But you took that idea and you ran with it and celebrating his life and went with it. It's what a story.
Well, it was my way to grieve. It was my way to grieve. And it's hard for, I know, my brother Mike or any of my brothers and sisters to get through the first couple chapters of my book because I open up with us finding about how I passed. So it's a very emotional book and it's going to be interesting. I think people are going to like it and it's going to be well received, but I don't know. It's just you sort of put it out there, sort of like a painting. Sometimes you paint something and people are like, I don't get it.
You know, writing a book, you know, you were just mentioning about your editor. Like, how do you find an editor? You know, what is it? What are they basically writing it for you? How does that whole kind of situation
I don't know.
work?
I think you're asking the wrong person. I've got such a love-hate relationship with some of my editors that I've hired over the years because it's like, you know, you have your voice and your style and then they have what they want and then you just sort of come in between. We did it. We had a goal. As many of you know, I write down my goals every day, and Benito and I found an old notebook the other day, and literally I had written down The Last 42 is a masterpiece, and it's published by July 15th, 2016. We went up a couple days before that.
I remember when you said that. You were like, check this out.
So that's exciting. It's fun to have goals and to accomplish them. And I tell you, the guy that we have here with us today is the gentleman that I learned everything from person. Well, most everything. Okay, 30%. But anyway, Mike Melia, my older brother. So excited about that. But Benito, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a couple of weeks, a minute. You and I had a chance to go to the All-Star game.
Oh, yeah.
All the festivities, home run derby.
The celebrity game right before then. You know what? And I was at the celebrity game, and there was a couple people I wanted to see. But what I did see when Jamie Foxx was pitching, Drew Brees was batting. I didn't know he's a switch hitter. I mean, he was bringing it. I was like, Drew Brees, not only the captain, everything on the New Orleans Saints, the quarterback, if you're not familiar with that, but he was on the baseball field hitting these balls, just bringing it. And I was like, whoa, this dude from Purdue is rocking it. You know?
Yeah,
Wait, didn't he used to play for the Chargers?
Yeah, that's what he got drafted by, right?
Hometown boy.
Yeah.
And but San Diego's been rocking. For those of you that are into Comic-Con, They were just
we had
invaded San Diego.
yeah, there was the Comic-Con, the Marvel Comics, everything. There was just massive amounts of people, costumes, running around Gaslamp District. I mean, it was a lot of people. They say, they were not in the kind of dorky thing, but you know what? When you get just that collective energy with people and the costumes and just everybody having a great time, and it was a heck of a show. It was 4 days. It was unbelievable. So I ran into my buddy Ray Higdon, one of the big, actually in the space of network marketing, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is, the industry of profession of network marketing and how one can be successful at that. And he came into, he was in town with his boys, and one of the days he showed me they all dressed up as Mortal Kombat, the characters from that, and when people get into that stuff, and it's just amazing how just everybody can just come together and have a great time at one of those shows. Pretty
People
cool.
do get into that stuff. It's crazy. But today we're going to talk with Mike Melia live here at the 162 Experience. And hey guys, if you're interested in getting my book, The Last 42, you can go to my website, 162, that's 162yankeegames.com. And I have put together, Mike, the deal of all deals. Not only can you get the classic, the 162, but we've bundled it with the new book, The Last 42, for only $20 plus shipping. So for $24, you can have both books, or if you want to get two of the new one, it is 2 for $25 plus shipping. But I'm going to tell you guys, I got a money-back guarantee. I've never sold the book to anybody, either book, that they've asked for their money back. That's pretty good.
Wow.
It's a lot of work to ask for money back,
It's easier just to avoid the conflict. So you're saying there have been unsatisfied customers? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying.
All right.
Some people put bad stuff out there.
All right. First question for Mike Melia. And Benito, feel free to jump in. First question for Mike Melia. What happened to you as a child?
Well,
Now, take us way back. You're very...
Paint chips.
You're rebellious by nature. I mean, we said a little bit during the pre-interview that you wind up attracted to industries or just people. You're just very rebellious. You're a lot for social justice. Tell us about you.
oh man, I'm not sure I'm rebellious by nature as much as that's a little out of there, and but I mean here it is that when I was growing up, I came of age during the time of the Vietnam War, and quite frankly, I started that was probably the first thing that started shattering my illusions, if you will. I mean, I grew up with, mom, dad, apple pie, the flag. Eisenhower was the president. Pope Pius was the pope, and Mickey Mantle played center field, and everything was like right in that little world. But then all of a sudden, everything was a little shaky. We were having boys come home from Vietnam in a box, and it was on the news every night. And I was a kid, I was watching it. It's like, man, this is scary stuff. And it really made me start to question things I never questioned before. And once once I started doing that, it was hard to stop, really.
Absolutely. And so we're kidding around, or not kidding around, but we went to the Grateful Dead shows the last couple of days. But this is something that was a big part of your life in the late 60s. Tell us a little bit about how you were introduced to either that kind of music and just sort of the alternative life of being a hippie.
Well, what happened again, back then, I was a pretty straight-laced high school kid. Went to Catholic high school, ran track, played football, and one morning my buddy Kevin and I got up really early. We drove into New York City. We wanted to go see, there was a British rock and roll guy called Alvin Lee, and he had a band called 10 Years After. So we got up early. We were thinking we were going to be the first people online to get these concert tickets, and we get there and there's a whole bunch of these long-haired people camping on the sidewalk. I'm like 17 years old. I'm going, you guys are going to see Alvin Lee too? And they said, no, we're getting tickets to see the Grateful Dead. I'm like, who are the Grateful Dead? And they said, well, you just gotta buy tickets. You gotta go to the show. And they convinced me and my buddy Kev to get tickets. Not only to get tickets, but to get late show tickets, because they said the early show is like a dud. The late show goes on all night long. And sure enough, like 2 or 3 weeks later, we're sitting in the 6th row center for this concert, and all these crazy people are dancing all around the place. The Grateful Dead's playing, and literally we're driving home at about 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30. I'm watching the sun come up over the east end of Long Island while I'm driving on the Long Island Expressway. And, I didn't know what was going on with this band and all these people, but I determined I really made a decision. I was going to understand what was going on, what this phenomenon was.
What'd you figure out?
Not much.
All right. Let's talk about some of your...
Did you go to Woodstock?
I did go to Woodstock.
He's got some great stories.
I was
he saw the Beatles.
And my first concert, my first concert, rock and roll concert, was a Beatle concert at Shea Stadium.
His first show.
Really?
His
That's
first
rocking.
Yeah.
Wow.
Ronnie Spector with the Ronettes opened up with Bobby Hebb and a bunch of other bands. When the Beatles came on, you couldn't hear a word. You couldn't hear anything. You'd hear the first, like, I wanna, and then the girls would just scream and scream and scream, and then the song would be over, and then you know.
He's like an encyclopedia, this guy.
Right.
You are, though. How, do you think that you're different? I mean, your thought process compared to most people that I know is so different. I don't know if you're smarter. Do you consider yourself smarter than most people?
I don't know that I consider myself smarter than most people. But I will tell you this, is that in my early 30s, around the time I turned 30 years old, I had the great fortune of meeting a guy named Robert Fritz. And Robert Fritz ran a seminar company out of Massachusetts. And first I took some of his seminars, and I really liked them. And timing was right. The company was growing, and I went to work with that guy for about 5 years. And one of the things that he really taught me more than anything else was what I would say, how to think critically. I think most people, their thinking process is like rote. They just, you know, there's just thoughts that come through, and they never really understand that your thoughts are things. You know, if you start reading personal development books, you start realizing what you hold in your consciousness, your thinking affects your activity. And then your activity affects your habit affects your beliefs about yourself and your whole reality. So, you know, I've studied a lot of that stuff, and I don't think it makes me any smarter, but I do think I think differently than most people.
So the people who are watching right now, you were talking about the seminar business. What is that entail? What is that about? Is because you're selling obviously products, but it was a personal development seminar kind of thing, or?
Yeah, a little different. I mean, the particular stuff that I worked on with Robert Fritz was, Robert was a creator. He was a musician and an artist. He still is. and Robert believed that that your life is like a canvas, that you get to create the life you want. You get to design the life you want. You know, Steve and I have talked about this at length over the years. But if you don't design the life, someone else will design it for you. So people are either, what we used to teach in this particular seminar series was an orientation that you're either the creator in your life or life is happening to you. One of those two things.
So let's talk more about that. Let's talk about that thought, action, habit loop that you're just talking about. Tell us some of the where that came from, the root of where that came from.
All righty. Well, two things. I took a few classes in system dynamics with a guy named Peter Senge back in the 80s. And Peter
wrote the fifth discipline? Or?
He wrote the fifth discipline, yes, sir. And he's an MIT professor, really smart guy, real sharp guy. And system dynamics are like, you know, there's positive feedback systems and negative feedback systems. And I won't go into all the depth of that, but I was sitting around just looking at what's the connection between how we think and what happens. And there's an old saying, it goes like this: sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. And I wound up like writing them in a chart. Like, so here's your thoughts, and then your thoughts go around to your actions, because out of you think and you take action. The actions you do again and again and again and again become habits. And then those habits tend to shape you. You tend to, be shaped by the habitual processes that you subscribe to on a daily basis. And that influences in your mind the kind of person you are, your character, or also your persona. So then thought, action, habit goes into here, and how you look at the world becomes influenced by how you've been looking at the world, if that makes any sense to you guys. So your perception affects your reality. And your idea about yourself, who you are, is probably the strongest suggestion to your own subconscious mind that determines what happens in your life.
Well, I think you've confused just about everybody else.
You know what's crazy though? When you're talking about you reap what you sow, when you were just talking about that, it's really nuts, because yesterday I was listening to Jim Rohn and I heard exactly him talking about that. And he was saying like the 7 habits of, just listing 7 things I remember. But it's exactly what you just said.
Disease of attitude, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But I got to listen to it again.
And Mike, let's just take something that you said and sort of work backward. You talked about designing your own life, and there's a lot of people that are watching that are newer to personal development, and so maybe some of these ideas are deeper for some people. But what's the first step, in designing your own life? If you're maybe someone's coming to your seminar today, or you're just meeting somebody and they're like, man, I feel like I need some direction in my life. What's the first couple of things that people can do to design their own life?
Well, I think a couple of different things. One is to really get a good sense of where you are right now in your life. What kind of time is this? And sort of get centered in the moment. And everybody's, everyone's at a different point in their life. And sometimes where you are right now, you're at the very beginning of a chapter, or maybe you're in the middle of it, or maybe you're at the end of it. And your life sort of is like chapters, right? And so when you look at your life, you get a feeling for where it is, where you are right now. But then the most important question is, where do you want to go? What do you want to get? What do you want? And, for a lot of people, answering that question becomes difficult because they haven't been in the practice of, once again, the habit of asking themselves what they want. Most people, or many, many people, suffer from the assumption that what I want doesn't really matter. Now, we're there to teach people other than that. What you want really matters. But they say, well, how do I know what I want? And then what we do is we point to, really very simply, what we would call your values. What's important to you? What are the things that are important to you in your life? And so when you ask that question, I used to do this one exercise, open up a course with it, and imagine this. Imagine that you've got 1 week to live. Okay, if you got 1 week to live, how are you going to spend that week? Maybe there's no horrible end at the week. You're just going to go to another planet or something like that. Who knows? But if you had 1 week left on this planet, how would you spend that week? And when you answer that question, here's what most people answer it with. I spend it with my family. I do things I really love to do. Just generally that. And what that means is that's indicative of those are the things that you value. So most of us really want to design our lives around what's important to us. And, that's a very individual question.
Would you, if you had 1 week to live, would you go to that Grateful Dead show we went to last night again as one of your 7 nights? I would. That was so much fun.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
So cool. So number one is you want to have a clear canvas.
Yes.
Then the second thing you want to do is figure out your values, what's important to you. What about actual exercises that people can do? I know there's a way that I start off my day, but there's a lot of different things let's talk about meditating or visualizing. How important is that to somebody's success? And for the people that you've seen visualize or meditate, what kind of results do you see people getting?
Well, again, when you're meditating or you're visualizing a result, if you're picturing a result, or maybe you're making a dream board and you're putting it up, the image up in front of you or on your refrigerator or on your phone, what you focus on tends to manifest. So when you visualize, what you're doing is creating an inner picture in your subconscious mind of what it is you want. And when you visualize, here's a big thing. Like in our business, you and I have worked on this, and you actually designed a visualization exercise where people are going across the stage and they're getting rewarded for something they've accomplished. And when they're doing that, you encourage them to picture how they look. How they're dressed, what they're looking like, who they're hanging out with. They're walking out on the stage. What does that feel like? And one of the things in visualization is to imprint into the visualization, or to infuse in it the feeling. And I call it coming from the spirit of already being there. That when you have a goal and you have a vision for your future, what would it feel like to be in that future? And then take that feeling and live that feeling today. Embody that, if you will.
Absolutely. And, you listen to people like Dennis Waitley, who worked in the 70s and 80s. I think it was Winning. I'm trying to think of the name of one of his early personal development programs. First thing I listened to. So let's talk about, Benito asked a little bit about the seminar business. Why don't we start back there with you getting into the seminar business? So you went into sort of a 10-1.
And this was in New York, right?
Yeah, New York and Boston now. Okay, back in my early 20s, I started a business called Rising Tide Natural Foods with my good partner, my good friend, Mr. Jerry Farrell, and my former wife, Melanie. And when I was transitioning out of that business,
So we're in 1976?
Started in 76, yeah.
Okay.
And around 81, 82-ish, I was transitioning out, and I was looking for something else to do. I was going through divorce. My wife and I decided she could keep the business, and I would go find something else.
Is that what you decided?
Well,
okay.
it sort of went that
Benito,
way.
we got a next set of questions. You feel the emotion?
I got it. I felt that. Coming out strong on that one.
Yeah, so anyway, I originally
She doesn't watch the show.
I took a seminar to figure out what it is I wanted. And when I was in that seminar, I was sitting in the back of the room, and I'm looking, man, there's about 200 people in this seminar. They paid about $200 each. That's about $40,000 that these folks are making on the weekend gross. I thought, that's not a bad business model. And then I watched the guys up front, and they were having a great old time. So I thought, man, here's what they're doing. They're helping people get in touch with what's important to them. They're helping people, get on the pathway of accomplishing what's important to them. And I thought that's pretty cool. And I like the idea. Here's some of the ideas that really drove me is like, why do people do what they do? How do they behave? Why do they behave that way? Because here's what we know. We know people want stuff, but then we also know that very oftentimes, about 90% of the time, they wind up without that. So what's going on that they're not able to accomplish what it is they want? And that really drove me, and that's how I got into the seminar business, and really with that question. I really wanted to find out, why do people do what they do?
Cool. And that actually also led you to network marketing. For those of you that don't know, Mike Melia, he has been very successful in network marketing for just about 20 years now, been making a multi-six-figure income, which in network marketing, it's one thing to do it for a couple of years, but to do it for a couple of decades, you've proven that you know how to do it. You've supported an organization internationally. You know, you're someone, when you show up to speak, there's thousands of people that come out and people are asking you for your autographs and you feel like a rock star. What's that been like? I mean, you're 42, you're broke, and now you're a few years older and you've got a pretty great life. How does that feel to sort of, I don't know, turn it around with network marketing?
Well, you know, they were very interesting times. I mean, you know, Jim Rohn that Benito was speaking of is a philosopher. He passed away a few years ago. But Jim often talks about what he calls a day that turns your life around. And that day that turns your life around, he would call it a day of disgust. And there was a moment back in 1994, and I was sitting in my office or my loft in New York City, and my son Luke was going to university, and he was going to the University of Virginia, and I saw the college tuition bill. I was like, whoa, it was $21,000 a year, and he was my first of 4 kids to go to college. I thought, how am I going to really afford all this education for these kids? I knew I had to do something different. Okay, I knew it. And a few days later, I got a call from my good friend John Fogg, and he said, listen, he said, this is what he says to me. He goes, that network marketing company you asked me about is coming into existence. I was like, I didn't ask you about a network marketing company. He went on to explain that these two gentlemen out of Texas were starting a seminar company, and they were going to put seminars on a private satellite network and beam it into people's homes for $50 a month. I thought, man, what a great idea. It was going to be subscriber based, and they were attaching a network marketing model to it. That's when I called you up. I remember you were like at a wedding in Virginia or something. I don't know how I reached you. I said, Steve, I found it. I found the way we're going to get rich.
And I had only given him my phone number for like emergencies. Like, do not call this number. And he called. We hardly ever talk. He's like, hey. I was like, what's everything okay? I thought our mom or dad died. And he's like, remember how we talked about being millionaires? Oh, I found it. I was like, well, what is it? I can't tell you. He's like, I'll give you one word, satellite. I was like, okay. So the rest of the wedding, I was walking around, oh, yeah, I'm going to make millions in satellites. But so cool. So those two individuals, if anybody that knows anything about network marketing, these two next names are icons in the industry. And then we also started working with other people. But let's talk about the first two, Jeff Olson and Eric Worre. What did you learn from these two as mentors early on in your network marketing career?
Well, I think probably Jeff's influence was strongest during the early days. And I learned a few things, but I think the biggest thing I learned was he did a talk on the Slight Edge philosophy. And the Slight Edge philosophy says this: it's the little things you do that don't seem to matter, but over time, the compounded effect brings you to massive success. And in the network marketing industry, he said that's possible. He went on and said, in 5 years in the network marketing industry, you can build a fortune, you can change everything. And here I was, 42 years old. So hearing that, I thought, you know what, this is what I need. Quite frankly, I felt like, you know, for you sports people out there, I felt like it was like the fourth quarter and it was 4th and long, and I had to make a complete pass to keep this game alive. You know, and for me, you know, at 42 years old, I mean, that's not, now I look back 42, to me that's young today, but then I thought, man, you know, the way the story's going, it's not going to end well unless I make some changes. And luckily for me, it was Jeff Olson's influence that got me to start to listen to Jim Rohn. And you and I have become big Jim Rohn fans. I know Benito is. And Jim Rohn said, I was in the personal development business at this point for 14, 15 years, but there was something that Jim Rohn said that really helped me change everything. And that is, he said, you have to take 100% responsibility for everything that happens on your watch. 100%, not 96, not 94, not like, you know, everything would have been great if that person hadn't done this and this. Whenever you take the power for your life, for your results, and you put it outside of yourself, you're disempowering yourself. And so Jim Rohn really helped me understand that and learn that. And then we went to work like madmen. I mean, we just went to work like crazy men.
It's so funny, though, how many different people in the industry. We study the sort of same thing in football. Like, if you look at the top coaches now, they sort of come from the roots of other great coaches. And in network marketing, our sponsor was Darren Hardy, who's the former editor of Success Magazine. You know, we've worked with people like Michael Klaus, has been a great buddy of ours, was actually in our organization. Mark Victor Hansen, Jack Canfield. It's been a real blast. Let's talk about...
It's pretty amazing how I see a lot of those guys like Darren Hardy, the Mark Victor Hansen, where they're putting out books. They're doing a lot other businesses rather than. I had no idea these guys were part of network marketing, but yet you say they're the roots, and that's the reason why decades later they're just on fire right now. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And Mark Victor Hansen was definitely somebody we learned a lot from.
You know, with Jim Rohn, I mean, one of my favorite Jim Rohn quote of all time probably is, "It's not what you get, it's who you become. Then who you become determines what you get." Because most of us are consumed with and concerned with what we're going to get, but the real key to success in life is what you give. You know, I read a book. It's written back in 1951 by a guy named Talbot Mundy, and it's called "I Say Sunrise." Right in the opening or in the opening preface, he says the purpose of life is to enjoy life. Well, but then he goes on to define the word enjoy, and he says to charge life with joy, not to enjoy life passively taking in. But literally, what do you bring to the table? What are your special gifts? What do you want your life to be about? And those are the questions that we ask. And I believe in network marketing. What's great is that it's a vehicle where you can ask those questions because you can truly design the life you want. Probably one of the biggest concerns for people in designing their life is, how am I going to fund it?
Yeah.
You know, what's going to pay for my world travel? How am I going to go to the seventh game of the last game of the NBA playoffs? How am I going to afford something like that? How can I go to the World Series? You know?
I got a question for you. How do you keep your energy level so high? I mean, honestly, you're like a 20-year-old. I mean, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
64.
Yeah, but I mean, you act like you're 25 running around.
Well,
that's that 2 gallons of coffee.
He's amazing. Wow,
I just
that helps.
I just try to keep up with you.
No, he's unbelievable.
I'll tell you, here is one of the keys, though, is hang out with people that are younger than you are. I mean, really key more than anything else. It's who you, I mean, this is, again, Jim Rohn, but it goes further than Jim Rohn, the law of associations. So you become like the people you hang with. You know, and I see, too many people who are my old friends, and I see them, and they...
That's why I date millennials. Just kidding, Facebook world. Don't text me.
That Facebook feed just blew up.
Oh, I know. So good stuff. So we're about halfway through. We're going to take a break from the interview, go back to our sponsors. We forgot to hit our sponsors today, Benito. So first of all, we want to do a sponsor, Legal Shield. Legal Shield is a company that Mike and I have been top associates with since 1998. But from a membership standpoint, it's unbelievable. We've got apps right now. The new app where you can just the Shake app, where you can get a contract signed just like that. We've got the new app where if you get a speeding ticket, literally before you pull over, I mean, you're already pulled over, but you're pulled over, you get a ticket, you can take a picture of it, send it to your law firm, and schedule a court date even before you pull out, just so you feel nice and secure before you get back on the road. But Legal Shield for about $20 a month, the best deal in town. We're closing in on 2 million families covered. We're going to 15 million over the next 5 years, but we need help. We need help in every city, in every state, in every province across the United States and Canada. If you own a business, if you're just tired of paying $200, $300, $400 an hour, if you're tired of being the family that doesn't have their will done, if you're just tired of being sick and tired, start a Legal Shield business. Call Mike and I today and let us know. If you've listened to the show and someone else shared it, sign up with them, because I don't want any of my Legal Shield associates getting mad at me for signing up their friends that listen to the podcast. Mike Melia here. Mike, let's talk about partnership.
All right.
You know, I know that it's an important thing for you. I remember a friend of yours gave you some advice after you were struggling in your early 40s. Bob, remember that advice that he gave you? He said you can't do it alone. Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was actually, the guy's name was Ken. I was on a phone conversation with this gentleman, Ken, and just as we were saying goodbye, and I was talking about getting something done, and he just had a throwaway line. He says, "After all, you can't get it all done by yourself." And at that moment in time, I was like a single entrepreneur, if you will. I was running my own seminars and this and that, but I didn't have any help. I didn't have any partners. And I'd had partners in the past, and I really wasn't always happy with how that relationship went. And
issues.
Yeah, issues, right? But you know, at that moment in time, and it was funny. It was. I remember that spring, and you were working as at an entry level job. You were just a couple of years out of college. You'd done some perfume door to door sales for a year, and I thought, man, that's
Designer fragrances, but yes.
Designer fragrances, yeah. And so, so we got you to live. You moved to New York City. Long story, right there, and you guys should hear it someday from Steve. But Steve got fired from his job, ostensibly for rolling his eyes at the owner. He got fired. He called me up. I said, well, come on down to my place. And then a couple of days later, we sat in the front seat of my car because we didn't have any money. And we couldn't go into a restaurant and sit down and just order some beers and stuff and talk. But we had a meeting in the front seat of my car. We didn't have it back in my loft because at the time my wife was really mad at me for not making any money or not making enough money. And so we sat there and I basically said to Steve, I basically pitched him on becoming my partner in the seminar business. And it was not long after that we were exposed to the network marketing concept with the company that we signed up with.
And so that pretty much was the same era, the same time frame that you turned your life around, your day discussed.
Yeah, it was around the same time. And I'll tell you one of the things in the process, and I think you'll remember this, we were in New York City, and Mark Victor Hansen, we were working very closely with Mark. I went to some of the seminars. It was right before he and Jack published the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. So they were about to explode. But they were doing a Learning Annex talk, Jack and Mark together, and Jack Canfield stood on the stage and he said, you know, you've got to have somebody who's got your back, somebody that you can trust no matter what happens. You know, he goes, for example, he says, when the rotating, you know, when the yogurt hits the fan, you've got to have somebody who's going to be there for you. And Steve and I were sitting next to each other. We looked at each other. And I think it was right around that time that, for me, I made the commitment that this guy's my partner, and we're going to do this thing, and nothing's going to stop us. I'm going to have his back. He's going to have my back. And we really held each other to a high standard, and that is that we would never quit.
That's cool, Mike. And Benito, I'm sorry for hogging the interview.
No,
I know Mike so well. If you want to ask something.
Well, I did have a question right now. I was talking to one of my friends, and she's on her path network marketing journey right now, and it's almost starting out. But what would you say if somebody's starting out? You know, because you went through that stage where you were 42 years old and you were like, I need a change. I need something. And you felt it inner something of you, and you were just like, something has to happen. But what if people are out there and they're saying, you know what, they kind of resonate with that, and they say, you know, I just need a change. I have to do this. You're put into a corner. What are like one thing of advice or some kind of thing you could tell somebody, and what would you tell them to do?
Well, I would say study. Become a student of the industry, become a student of personal development, but also a student of the network marketing industry. And we had the great fortune, once again, I would say, listen to Jim Rohn. We got to meet Jim in person. In fact, I got to introduce him one time. It was a great honor. I was so nervous. Yeah. And
it was before we had pretty nice clothes.
Oh, you're right.
And Mike, tell me about your tie.
It was like a skinny little tie. Was that what I said?
It was one of those little cowboy ties.
Oh, right. It was a bolo tie. Now I remember that. But we got involved in the network marketing industry. Neither one of us owned a suit. In fact, I actually did own one suit, the suit I'd gotten married in 20 years earlier.
That's the second one or the first one?
The first one.
Wow.
Second time I got married in a tux.
Okay. Nice. Stepping it up. What do you think? Is there going to be a third time? I'm just kidding. Cut.
I'm sworn off.
So let's talk about the next phase of life for you. I mean, this is, you look at people like Willie Nelson is one of your guys, right? Merle Haggard passed away recently. The Grateful Dead. I mean, you got like John Mayer and you got Bob Weir. I mean, no offense, but I'm sort of like John Mayer, and you're like Bob Weir. I mean, you're like, you see the sunset. I mean, you're at a whole different stage of life now. You got grandkids, which seem to be a whole different way of life for you. I mean, it seems to what brings you the most joy. Is that fair at this point in your life? Well,
the grandkids are something else. I mean, they all live in New York, so I do my best to get to New York as much as I can and see them. And, as you get older, I think one of the things that does happen is you lose friends, okay? People die. And then secondly, I think you come to grips with that idea. I mean, I remember when I was in my early 30s and I was just getting started in the seminar industry, one of the things I used to, work with people is like, look, life is short. I mean, life is short. Now it's 30 years later, and I will tell you that life is short. I remember 30 years ago, like, it was nothing. I remember when we got started in the industry, like, I can recall just running around Mary's house when we lived at her sister's home when we were broke, you know. So you've got to appreciate what you have. You have to appreciate your friends, your family, the people that you care about. You've got to appreciate the beauty of the planet, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think for me, as I get older, one of the sadder things is, and I know this was true for Dad. For many of you don't know this, but I lived with my dad the last few years of his life. In fact, when he was in home hospice care, I was the primary caregiver. I joke around about it. That's scary. You don't want that to happen to you, with me, right? But you know one of his disappointments was the just how angry Americans seem these days in comparison to the country that he grew up in.
Powerful.
Oh yeah.
And was that something that was unsettling for him?
It was unsettling for him. I mean, he was a lifelong Republican. He voted for Barack Obama in 2008. First time he ever voted Democrat. He even told me that. And then, you know, when Obama became the president, one of the things he was very upset with was the Republican Party, how badly they treated that guy. And you know, I'm no big Obama fan or anything like that, but it really is true. We didn't back him as the president.
We're in a mess right now. Would you say you want to stay away from politics? Or you
Oh
want to
man, let's
talk
stay
about
away
our current situation?
Let's make a left-hand turn.
So talk about losing friends. You lose friends because they die, but you also lose a lot of Facebook friends. I mean, you know
what? When people lose a lot of friends, when you're growing a network marketing business, you know, you become more of who you are. You know, you hang out with more influential people, hang out with more of that circle of friends.
You see, that's where people don't get. Sometimes people think that you don't hang out with them anymore because they're not buying your product. You're not hanging out anymore because you're improving your associations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
there's a big difference.
So how do you deal with that? If somebody's like, you know what, all my friends, but it's somebody who's just starting or just getting started with their career in network marketing, and they're like, you know, I'm starting to lose these friends, blah blah blah. But what they don't realize is they're becoming more of what they want to be and have that influence of prosperity, of empowerment, of Jim Rohn, et cetera, all these guys. But they are losing their so-called friends. How do you deal with that? What would you tell them?
Well, I mean, but again, I'm going to go back to Jim Rohn. Jim always said this. He said that the two most important elements are your attitude and your associations. And your attitude determines everything, because your attitude's either, I mean, I love the way Steve says when he says, listen, there's nothing less important than the score at halftime, right? And he goes, now, some people look up at the scoreboard and they let the scoreboard affect their attitude. Other people let their attitude affect the scoreboard. And that's really the way you want to do it, guys. I mean, you know.
It's a good one.
Yeah,
That's my only quote. I got two quotes. The other one is doing leads to doing and waiting leads to waiting.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike, if it's okay, let me take you back. You know, you talked about earlier, you referenced that you felt like it was fourth down, it's fourth and long. And it really made me start to think, I didn't ask it then, but I'm asking now, that first year, 3 years in the business, that was like the last run. I mean, it was like, you know, and we just kept pounding it out. So, you know, Benito, you asked a question like, you know, how does somebody deal with all that stuff? It's like, you know, you're in good shape. You go to the gym. Think about everything that you've done over the last 10 or 15 or 20 years to stay in great shape. That's how you build a network marketing business. Daily discipline, showing up every day, great attitude, never missing anything.
One of the things that we did and we worked on, and we really worked on this like vigorously, is protecting our attitude, protecting how we thought. I was going through a messy divorce at the time, and we'd be working the phones during the day. And sometimes my wife would call with a problem or something, and sometimes that would escalate into an argument or a fight. And I just learned this. I stopped taking her calls during the day. I stopped taking her calls while I was working. But that also, and I got this from Darren Hardy, when you're working, I mean, things are a little different in the world of technology today, but at that point in time, when we were working the phones, we did not take incoming calls. If you start taking incoming calls, then whoever's calling you, you're on their itinerary, you're on their schedule. But when you're working the phones, you're making your outgoing calls. The only time we would take incoming calls if we knew that person was calling with a three-way phone call where we could talk to a brand new person and help someone get started.
You know, I think you'd also agree, though, too, is that like when you're dealing with problems or situations where you're in all-out massive action, you're immersed in it, you take care of those situations. Like, all right, I got to call Judy and deal with this. You get those three things out of the way, sort of like a grudge, or if you're mad at somebody, just let's get that over with, because what we're dealing with right now is so important. I mean, they talk about sense of urgency and a fear of loss. Benito, no one had a sense of urgency.
People are talking about their why, but what made you guys? What was it where you were just like, you had to You were put in a position where you had to.
We're living with our older sister. You know, he's 42. I'm 24. We're broke as a joke. I'm a year out of the perfume business. People are still making fun of me from that. I was dog walking. I mean, I'm a nanny. I mean, my life sucked, you know. And when we got approached with network marketing, and, you know, we've all went our different ways now, but it was the early influences of Jeff Olson and Eric Worre and Jim Rohn, Darren Hardy, that sort of led us to who we are today.
Well, what we did was we stayed focused like this, laser focused, and we pushed everything else to the side. And I remember, I mean, this is really funny. Like we had a stack of bills at one point in time, you know, and I was always negatively affected by these folks calling. So Steve started taking those calls. And I remember one day, this woman's calling. He's on the phone with her, and she's just mad that she hasn't gotten whatever payment we owe them and stuff. And we had a stack of bills. So Steve's sitting there, and he's like, "Listen, man, you know, I got the bill right here. Yeah, we plan on paying as much as we can of it this month." And she starts yelling at him still. "I want all this and that." And he goes, "Listen, I'm taking your bill and I'm putting it halfway down the pile. I got a whole pile of bills. You were on the top, now you're halfway." And she kept yelling at him. She goes, "Now you're at the bottom of the pile." I thought, man, that's good.
The other thing to do, you don't do this every month, but every once in a while, if you can't pay a bill, you take the electric bill, right, and you write a check for that amount, but you write it to the IRS. See how that works? And then you send a bill to the IRS, and you write it to the electric company. And they go, well, he tried, and so it buys you an extra couple weeks. That's a trick. You can't use that every night. That's one way to do it. But you know, but it's that
we're not professional legal presentation.
But it's that spiritual relationship between, you know, money and how you feel about money. There's a great book, Stuart Wilde, Mike. Maybe talk about that influence.
One of the great books, and I've read a bunch of this gentleman's books, but Stuart Wilde, a British guy, wrote a book called "The Trick to Money is Having Some." and that's a good thing. But here's what he talks about. He says it's not so much how much money you have, but how do you feel about money. And this was just an eye-opener for me, because many times what most of us, a lot of us having a conversation about money in our head is like, you know, it's a pain in the neck, it's this and that. If you have a friend who's a pain in the neck and you see him walking down the street, what do? You avoid him. If you think money's a pain in the neck, you know what? You avoid it. So you've got to start to actually like money. It's a weird thing to say that you like something that's, you know, but it's money, right? But I love money, man. I love having cash in my pocket. You know, we were so broke all the time that after we started really making money, I'd always carry a couple $100 in my pocket just so I'd feel good about it.
Absolutely. This way you always got cash on you too. Pretty smart thinking there. And he had an exercise in his book that if you've ever hung out with me or Mike, and we ever see money anywhere, if it's like a penny or a dime, or it could be dirt, it could be under someone's shoe at a concert. The idea, at least the way I take it, is you got to get over your humility and dealing with money. So if, like, say it's a beautiful girl at a concert and I'm like, "Hey, can you move your foot for a second?" And I grab the penny underneath, I'm like, "Thanks." And then people are like, "Is it heads up or heads?" That doesn't matter. It's money. You gotta. And if you say no to a penny, you're saying no to $1 million spiritually. That's the idea.
And whenever I do that, whenever I pick up a dime or a penny, here's what happens: you start picking up pennies, but you start finding quarters. You know. I mean, literally, one time we're walking through a baseball field. We're me and my daughter Danny, and we're broke. I'm broke at the time, got no cash left. I'm going to play softball, and my daughter and I are walking across the baseball field at Prospect Park in Brooklyn. She's all of 4 years old, maybe 5, and she looks down, and there's a wad of bills. She picks it up, she goes, "Daddy, look what I found," and it was like $35. So I said, "Wow, that's pretty good." Then she goes, "Can we go eat sushi?"
That's pretty funny. Hey, I want to ask you one more story, and then we'll start to wrap this interview up. It's been great, Mike. Thanks for being on. I think we got to a lot of stuff. I know we didn't really have a plan. We were a little scattered today, but we just sort of went with the flow. Your relationship with Dad, I know you touched on that a little bit. At the very end, you hired, is it a medium?
Oh, yeah, after he died.
Yeah, after he died, and all the brothers, or a bunch of the brothers went.
Yeah.
What was that like? I was there. I know what it was like for you.
Here's what happened is that my dad, before he passed away, he couple of years in, he passed at 88 years old, and when he was about 86, he read this book on the afterlife, and he was really doing his research to find out whether there's an afterlife or not, and what did I think, and what did he think, and
sort of waited to the last minute, didn't he?
But he read this one book, and I don't remember the name, but it was written by a doctor, so it was pretty, it was a pretty convincing book actually. And I had read another book by a guy who was a spiritual medium from Long Island. I think his name was Stephen Levine. I'm not sure about that. And anyway, and I'd read his book years ago, and then I was in a bookstore and I saw it, so I bought it for my dad. Okay, long story short, this medium was like in early days of cable TV. He had a show called Are You Psychic with another guy, and they used to go to the cable network, and right before them in the cable network, in the same place, there was a priest and a rabbi that used to do a show together. And turns out that priest
Sounds like a joke.
This is all right. This is a long story, but that priest was a close friend of my dad's. So all of a sudden, this book, we're reading this. I give him this book about this medium, and my dad like, well, Father Hartman's in it, and this and that. And Father Hartman was this medium spiritual advisor, and blah, blah, blah.
Third party.
So my dad read the book, and then he and I said, listen, I said to him, I'll tell you what, once you go, I'll go see that medium on Long Island, and if there's an afterlife, we made a key word.
Did you make him split the money for the medium?
No, and it was a little. It was
expensive.
It was pricey.
You were flying high back then.
Oh man,
fit the whole bill.
Right, it was $2,000 too.
Oh,
It was
geez.
crazy. Oh yeah, but we all went. There was not all of us went, but 4 of the brothers went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And mom and dad were there. Everybody was there.
Well, the medium is like channeling my mom. My dad didn't get a word in edgewise, just like old days, right? So pretty funny. But the medium was channeling mom, and mom was talking. Really, I mean, it really did seem like he was using the language that she would use, which is pretty funny and pretty. I mean, I know we all had different experiences, but me and my dad had a code word he was going to use, never did. So now I still don't know if there's.
And what was the code word?
The code word was 162. I said, Dad, listen, because
I don't think the guy was a big baseball fan.
This was the same year that Steve was on the 162 tour. In fact, if you read the 162 book, I think one of the great sort of sub stories or in that book is my dad's story, is our dad, and not the last 42 is like the sub story is our brother Jim, and my dad used to say to me how fortunate he felt he was because he was passing on and he hadn't lost any of his kids or none of the no tragedies in our family. Then after he passed, our brother Jim died a couple of years later, and then we lost our nephew Tim, and that was probably, of all the things, probably the saddest.
Yeah, it's been the last couple of years brings family closer together, but at the same time, life is short, and you got to enjoy it, and you just never know when any moment's going to be your last. And when Mike asks questions like that, the last week of your life, what did you do with it? That's a powerful question. So thank you so much for the time and energy of being with us today, and all you've done for folks all across the world as you've been all over sharing your message and your story. What's next for you when you're in your twilight years?
Hey, go easy there, go easy. Well, first of all, my son Luke, one time when he was about 4 or 5 years old, said, Dad, and this is back in the 1980s, he says this to me, he goes, I think if you can live till 2018, you can live forever. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I think by 2018, they'll be able to have replacement body parts. I said, even your brain? He goes, yeah, probably even your brain. Like, whoa. So, we're only 2 years away, so I'm figuring, 2 more years, I'm going to live forever.
Some of you know I was at a seminar a couple weeks ago, and there was the guy from the TV show Scorpion there, and he's supposedly one of the 5 smartest guys in the world. His IQ, even smarter than you. His IQ is like 197, and he basically said over the next 5 to 10 years, you don't even want to know what's going to happen. So what you're talking about is very close to happening. You can mark my words for that.
We'll live forever.
Benito?
But to answer your question, though, Steve, as I plan on traveling the world extensively and hanging out with the kids and the grandkids and my friends and my family, and there's a lot of life to explore and to be with, and I think you should, I love your new little motto where you got from this seminar you just talked about, where the first thought you have in the morning is a thought of being grateful for something, and then the last thought you have before you go to bed is something you're grateful for. And in the middle, you just go with the flow. I love that.
Go with the flow, baby. I love it. I've been living like that my whole life, and now I just have words to sum it all up. And hey, if you're listening, you like what you see, go to our website, 162yankeegames.com, and you can pick up both books here. Benito, it's been a pleasure, buddy.
Always, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you for being on the show.
Hey, Benito, I love you, brother.
Hey, one last question for you. We always end this way, Benito. So, Mike, you're talking to yourself. You're 18 years old. And by the way, when he was 18 years old, he was voted best looking in high school. And he thought they were making fun of him.
I did.
Well, low self-esteem. That's okay. He's gotten over it. And so, you're talking to your 18-year-old self, and you're looking back. You're, 40 years, well, not quite 40 years of experience. Well, yeah, a little over 40 years of experience, 50 years of experience. And you've, anyway, 46. And so you're going to give advice to yourself at age 18. You sat down, give yourself a little talk. What do you say to yourself?
Well, that's a tough one because at age 18, I really wasn't listening to many older people. You know, I was a believer in what Bob Dylan had once said: is don't trust anyone over 30. Now I was 18. Now I'm a little over 30. But you look back and you say, be smart. I would say there's a few things I would do differently. If I was going to do anything differently, I think I would have started stashing money aside from the age of 18 instead of waiting till later.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Well, guys, it's a wrap. It's a Grateful Day here. Mike, it's been fun, and I'm not sure when the Grateful Dead are on tour again, but hopefully you and I shall connect in the future, my friend. Benito, it's a wrap.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Going down the road, feeling bad.
Ow.